What's happening, everybody? Good morning. I mean, if you're in LA anyway, it's morning. For me, it's kind of on the early side. But I got a session starting at noon, so got to do this thing a little bit earlier today, which is fine. It's good to get up and get going. Plus, I had to get Delilah moving. You know, in the morning, she likes to sleep in a little bit. So let's see how everybody's doing. This is going to be... I just kind of wanted to share some of the different, like photos from the very beginning of the studio, because literally today is 10 years since I got the keys for this place. I can't believe it's been 10 years already. It's like flown by. But I don't think I've ever shown any actual photos or anything from the actual build or how it's morphed through the last 10 years. So I kind of wanted to do that a little bit today, because this was just a shoebox when I got the keys. There was nothing in here except the little front room in the bathroom. That was literally it. And I would assume, like most of us, we don't have giant budgets when we build our studios. So you build it initially, whether it's in your garage, your basement, a commercial building like this, whatever, you build it, and then it kind of morphs over time as you figure things out and add stuff. Let's see. So, and this place is really morphed over the years. It's changed quite a bit, and it's changing even more now. There's still some things that are finally getting done, or just changed as we realized what the workflow was going to be. So you build things to kind of fit that. Would it be nice to have a giant budget? Hell yes, man. But, that doesn't exist, at least not for me. So we had to do things little by little. So I want to start with one of the very first photos. Actually, the very first photo, just to show you where this came from. When I got the keys, I came over and I stood, there's a doorway, and I'll show you that in a second. It's over to my left, but it's basically the front of the building. And let me cut into this sucker. That is what the building looked like the day I got the keys. Just a bunch of fluorescent lighting hanging. The ceiling it looks like it's finished, but it's not. It's that paper reflective stuff to keep the heat out. Because it was, I think National Geographic, someone at the National Geographic TV was renting this building before me. So they were just using it as a testing building, or whatever. Because when I looked at it, there was all sorts of like little cities built and just like props and things like that. It looks like they were coming up with show ideas or whatever. So that was what it looked like when I got it. There's a sliding door in the back, which is no longer there. All that's been filled in, and there's a regular door, but it was pretty bare bones, and it was crazy. I mean, I don't know if anybody else has had this feeling when they built their studio, that you initially look at it and it's not done whatsoever, and you're thinking, oh, this is gonna be cool. This can go here, that can go here, and that go here. And then the second you start doing the work, you realize, holy crap. This is going to be a lot of work. And this was totally a lot of work, man. What's happening? A 10-minute how not to? We'll get to, like, dithering and all that stuff. Ernesto and I are going to do some things on that. We'll get to that stuff on another time. This is just... I just wanted to share like 10 years of the studio and some of the build to see what went into it, because I haven't shown any of that stuff. So we'll definitely get to some of that stuff. So this was the first photo. This is the doorway. You can see I'm actually started doing chalk lines for where some of the walls were going to go. But that doorway, there we go, is where I was standing when I took that first photo. And you can see that's the only stuff that was in this building, is that the bathroom, which we actually moved the door to the other side, and then the front little lounge area that goes outside. And that was all that was in this building, completely. And then this is about an hour or two later when I got a ladder and I started ripping all this crap out of the ceiling just to get it going. There's the back. Here, I got a photo of everything here we go. This is a couple hours in, and I've ripped everything out of the ceiling so we can see what's going on up there and see what I had to work with. And that was one thing when I built this, I knew I was gonna have to build some things, but it took us like 2 weeks to get everything just ready to even start building. There was so much, through all the years, there was so much conduit in here with wiring that no one would ever either fix what was there or redo it. They would just be like, oh, we need something new, so they just put it over and over and over. There were just layers and layers of conduit and wiring and stuff everywhere. And probably 60% of it wasn't even hooked up anymore. But we had to get all that stuff out of here just so we could see what we were working with. And that's when I started realizing, I saw the ceiling and all that stuff was hanging there. I was like, oh my Lord. Did we rent or buy? I'm renting. Buying in Los Angeles is not cheap. But I'm in an area I've got to still, even though it's quite expensive up here now, because about 4 years ago, commercial pricing in Los Angeles went up like 40% across the city. So when my initial lease came up and I had to sign the next one, it was a bit of a sticker shock because everything went up. But I still have pretty favorable rent here, and I've got the owner of the building who I lease it from is really cool. So we've got a good little complex going here, so it's not bad. Let me see, what else do I got? I just put a whole handful of photos. Yeah, there's our initial lumber buy. And that's my buddy. These are blurry old iPhone photos because this is 10 years ago. Man, no good iPhone cameras really. Well, we thought it was good then, but just clearly or blurrily, you can tell it's not. But that was the initial lumber buy, all loaded. We were actually able to fit it in his pickup. And then this is the night before everything started. Let me see if I can get to some of the framing, because that was, to me, whenever anything goes wrong, this is what I ask myself: what would Han Solo do? And most of the time it gets you in trouble, but it's also a lot of fun. Okay, so we started framing the control room. Let me go back a couple photos, because you can see there's a handful of windows we had to deal, those windows on the side that we had to deal with. And what we did, that was part of our what would Han Solo do. So all of these, I may have a photo of this later. We built a frame inside these windows, filled them with insulation, and then there's 2 layers of drywall over them. And then this is actually the wall that Mike is working on right there. And Mike he was a student of mine years ago at Musicians Institute and happened to be a contractor. He built houses and buildings and stuff for a living. And pretty much he and I did all the framing and all the initial work. And then once that was up, we actually hired his crew for some drywall. Then I had, Ernesto was over, we were all putting in insulation and then the actual wiring of everything. But this is, you can see we took the bathroom down to the studs. We pretty much took everything in there except that back wall down to the studs. So this is the side wall that goes to the ISO booth out of the control room. And there it is up. You can see the electrical mess behind there that didn't get dealt with it took about 3 months. And that stuff got dealt with pretty much, well, not last, but about halfway through the framing when that got, so this you can see what we decided to do because of the way the rafters ran. And I wanted to keep, you can't see it right now, but the rafters and everything are still open in the control room. We built the framing up to there, and then Mike built like frames that went inside it. So the drywall actually goes all the way up to the ceiling. But the initial overall wall framing only went up there, and then he built things to go in between the rafters, and it just ended up being a little bit easier. So here's the side wall. So the wall, that's my wall right here, where I'm at now, is, you can see it's kind of angled. So both the control room kind of goes in the back like this, and then it just angles a little bit like that. And I mainly did that because the ISO booth, I wanted to have a little extra room, because the one right here, it's not huge, but if that wall would have just stayed parallel, it would have cut out some extra space. It would have been a little bit too tight. So we decided to angle it just a little bit to get a little bit of room there, so we did both sides the same just to make it easier to deal with inside the room. And it's not a huge angle. It's like, you know, it's not like going like this. It's just kind of turns a little bit and goes in. All right, there's the side framing. This was interesting to me because I had actually never done any framing before. So watching Mike and helping Mike do this was actually really kind of cool. I don't think I would do this again. I think building a studio myself one time was cool. Next time, no, definitely not. All right, so here is the framing pretty much for the control room walls. So you can see both side walls are up. You can even see the eyes on the left side there, the ISO booth door is there, and then that's for the window, obviously. You can see that. Yep, gotta have a mask. Man, when I was sanding the rafters, holy crap, it was dusty. Still had the mohawk. And this was important too. We had no music in there whatsoever. So we took an iPhone, and I don't know if you guys have probably done this. If you take your phone and you need to hear it, if you cup it in your hand, or if you're in the car, if you put it in the cup holder, you know, it will amplify. So we found out if we just took the dustbin and just put the phone in the back of that, pointing at the back, it like doubled the volume of the phone so we could actually have some music while we were working. And then we pretty much lived off Starbucks and Monster drinks, that's the last time I ever had a Monster. I had way too many of those while I was there doing that. It was crazy. The amount of insulation, a lot of the amounts of all of this stuff was kind of, you know, it's one thing to see it on paper. It's another thing to go to Home Depot and start buying it, realizing, holy crap, this is a lot of stuff. I've never built anything on this scale. So now we got Easy E in here, and he may join us today. He's out of town. Let me see. Let me just check. So he may not. But then once we got all the framing up, we had like a 24-hour, you know, flurry to get all the insulation, is because we had Mike's crew come and do all the drywall, because I decided I'm not hanging drywall. I think initially we had 144 or 148 sheets of drywall on the initial build, and that didn't include getting the ceiling done in the live room. Oh, this is my favorite sequence. This is Mike yelling at me, getting back from me yelling at him when he was a student all the time. But it didn't go well for him, as you can see. And this is what happens when you work too many days in a row. Like 18-hour days. All right, so this is, obviously you can see. I don't know why I'm explaining the photos. You can see the freaking photos, but I'm going to explain them anyway. All the insulation, well, most of it is in. And this was crazy. We had 3 of us doing this. I think we did all of it in the whole place literally in a day, like a long day, 18 or 19 hours. Because we finished about 3 in the morning. I remember we did it, and Mike's crew showed up at 6. I think I just slept in the front room on the floor or whatever was up there. Here's from the live room angle. And the live room got done last. You can see a bunch of the junk from the old studio on the right-hand side there. That was kind of a pain. That was the interesting thing, too, because when I shut the place down in Hollywood, which I think I have a photo of that in here, too, I actually talked to pretty much all my clients and everybody we were working with, going, look, we're building this new studio. I've got to get out of the one we were in down in Hollywood, and I need to shut down for a while, because I was teaching 3 days a week at MI, and then I would come here after teaching and work till about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then every day that I wasn't teaching, I was here building that thing, so I couldn't really keep the other studio open. So we literally packed that thing up, came in and put it all in a corner here, and just spent 3 months doing this. So here's drywall going up in the control room. It was nice working with 12-foot sheets, or those are 10-foot actually. I have a photo of that too. One thing, if you're building, okay, here's the back. This is kind of cool. So this is the bottom right doorway, is the doorway I was in when I took that very first photo. But we built some storage above that, which you can see the wood frame there on the right. That's where the wall actually stopped. So what Mike did is he built a doorway you can see on the upper right, and all of that is storage. And I put stuff up there that I don't really need to get to hardly ever. It's not hard to get to, but it's a bit of a pain because you have to get on a ladder. But when you see the finished of the photos of the control room, it's a big base trap along the side, but the left side, Mike built it so it's got 2 handles, no latches, and all you have to do, you push and you can pull it out and you can get to that storage. And then there's a door that's like 2 layers of drywall and 2 pieces of plywood that goes over that square. Panorama shot of the control room. Man, early iPhones, they just didn't quite have the quality, did they? Holy crap. Yeah, here's the old studio. So this was the Hollywood studio days before getting everything out of there. And it was just a wreck. That place was not much bigger than what you see in the photo. Literally not much bigger than what you see in the photo. It was insane how small it was. I had a lot of Golden Age stuff then too. All those MXLs. Ah, here we go. This is pre-painting, so everything is taped and mudded. How many credit cards will I need? Man, I tell you what, I shut down Home Depot. I think the joke was I closed down Home Depot every day for 3 months. You know, I used to go over there and, you know, play closing time as I was walking through that place. And here's what I did before we did this. I had a limited budget. I mean, I think this whole place was done initially for less than 20 grand. I had saved up some money. I sold a bunch of gear that I just didn't need or use, and I just stockpiled as much of that money as I could. Ernesto helped out a little bit, and even my grandparents, who I used to work for my grandpa back when I was in high school, and he's a master carpenter. And I say is because he's 101 now and still going. So I learned a lot of building and doing, you know, we did flooring and carpet and some cabinet work and that sort of thing. So I learned a lot of that from him. So I had some idea and skills on how to do things, but they actually helped me build this initially too. And it was fun calling him when we'd run into a problem. I get to call him and he could kind of, oh, do this, check this out, which was kind of cool. So we initially, I think, had about, oh man, I'd have to look back at this, but I want to say the initial round of lumber and all, everything was, I was able to get all of that for less than 10 grand. Because I got on months before I'm going to show you one photo. Months before I even had this place, when I was looking, when I realized, okay, Hollywood's too small. We're down in this room that's like 250 square feet. I'm starting to record bands live in there. It's not working. Need a bigger place. So I started looking for places that were finished first because I didn't want to build. I wanted to try to move in somewhere and just continue working. But those prices, even in 2013, were ridiculous. There's 2 that I looked at out of probably, I don't know, 70 or 80 that I looked at. I mean, in 3 months, I looked at well over 100 buildings. And maybe half of those actually were built to some degree or some variation of a studio, and there were 2 that I actually liked. One was too small. It was like a 200 square foot live room and a 200 square foot control room. Really nice. They did a really great job building it, but it was $3,500 a month for that. I'm like, man, I can't, what are you gonna do in here? I can't do bands and things in this at $3,500 a month as your starting overhead, and that doesn't include any of the bills. Then I looked at another place that had a 200 square foot control room, like a 300 square foot live room, and then a couple little rooms, but it was really narrow, and it was the same thing. It was like over 3 grand a month. So that's when I go, you know what? I got to build a place. And that's when we started looking. So even before I had this building, I was on Craigslist. And if you want to go through the hassle, this is a great way to save money because this stuff comes up all the time. I bought my initial 90, I think, sheets of drywall from a construction site in Santa Monica that had finished building, had all this extra drywall. It was already paid for by the client. So they sold me 4 by 10 by 5/8 sheets of drywall for $4 a sheet, which is cheap. and I loaded 90 sheets of drywall, 3 trips from Santa Monica here to the valley, which is like 20 miles. And I started at my friend Scott's. He had a little easement and let me store it there because I had no studio. I did 3 trips in a day all by myself, 90 sheets of drywall, because it cost next to nothing. I got a lot of the joint compound the same way, or the mudding. I just got on Craigslist and I spent every day, I just searched for I had my list of, this is gonna be my building supplies, who was selling what, and I found so many places in town that just had stuff left over from builds, and I was buying stuff for pennies on the dollar, which helped tremendously, because if I had to go buy all that stuff like outright at Home Depot or Lowe's or somewhere, I would not have had the resources at that time to do it. It just never would have happened. So it's like all this drywall you see in these photos, this is, yeah, here's the truck, pickup truck. That's one load. I went as many as, it took 3 trips. There's the first pile of it, and there were 2 of those piles. And I stored it at Scott's until I got a studio, and then I had to yank it all over here after that. So yeah, it gets expensive, man. It can get expensive really quick, but if you're doing it yourself, hit Craigslist or any, OfferUp or any place that's, that people list stuff for sale, because you might be surprised what you can find. It takes a little bit of time and effort, but it can save big bucks. And if you're like me, you don't have any of those resources, you got to do everything you can to kind of make it work. And that's another reason, we don't need to see that again. Hollywood Bowl, okay, back, me hitting Mike. Yeah, drywall, old studio. Okay, there we go. Okay, flooring. Oh, I didn't put the other photos. It was mid-November, late November, and it was pretty cold, and there was no heat on in the building yet. And we were gluing this down to the cement. We had the glue that also had the vapor barrier in it. And we had little space heaters trying to just keep it warm enough so we'd heat up a section of floor and we'd put the glue down. You'd have to sit, and it took forever to set because it was cold. And then we had a conveyor line. Mike was out front, literally on the sidewalk, and this is like 10 or 11 at night, cutting strips, measuring. There was a person in the mill that would bring it in, and then I'd put it down. And it was just a conveyor belt as the glue would start to take hold. And it was a pain in the ass, but it actually worked out pretty well. So there's Mike doing the trim. So where he's actually kneeling is where the couch is. There's carpet in that area. Okay, here's that. This is what I was talking about earlier with the back. So this the back wall of the control room. It's a giant base trap. The door isn't on the left side yet, which you'll see in a minute, but it's all rigid fiberglass. It's a huge air gap in there too. So there's 3 inches of rigid fiberglass, because that's all I had at the time. Keep meaning to take it down and put more up, but control room works, so I just haven't gone to the headache yet. But it's a huge, huge gap behind it. Like at least, that's probably at least 2.5 feet. So it's a gigantic air gap. And this is actually the first iteration of the back. Let's see if I have the other angle. I think I do here in a minute. You'll see where the door is, the removable door. You can't really tell it's there because it's all black. It all looks like just one giant panel up on the top. This glass, this is one of my biggest regrets of building, or things that I wish I would have thought through a little bit more, is the glass. I wish I would have put a window twice the size, or at least another foot down, another foot up. The width isn't too bad actually. But even at this size, which is about 7.5 feet by 2.5 feet, it's a 5/8 piece and a 3/4 inch piece of laminated glass. It is heavy. And if you notice in this photo, I'm not lifting it. It's Ernesto, Mike, and Santiago are putting in there, which is why Mike's flipping me off, because I'm in there telling him to work and they're putting the glass up. But that glass is ridiculously heavy. But that's the one thing that I wish I would have put a larger window when we did it. First patch panel in the live room, which is just completely different now. And that was the first round of patch panel in the ISO booth, which is in the corner. So you can see some of the wiring. And a little bit of that is dual connection, so that it's connected control room, ISO booth, and live room, and some of it's just pass through. And that's also a little bit different now. And this was the biggest learning experience of the whole damn thing, was the actual wiring of the patch bays, wiring of getting to those finished patch panels, because there's stuff in the walls. I know we've talked about this a few times on the shows, but there's tie lines and things that are in the walls that I never ever would have thought about if it wasn't for my buddy Scott Francisco, who's worked in every studio in town. He's helped wire studios, he's built studios. And when I was talking to him initially, he's like, look, you got to put this in, you need to put this in, you need to put this in, you got to have this. I'm like, what are you even talking about? I have no tie line for what, why? And he goes, because you're going to might want to do this, you might want to do this. And I'm glad I listened, because that stuff gets used constantly. But the interesting thing was neither Ernesto and I had ever wired an Elko patch bay before, ever. So this first experience of doing this was, it was a giant learning curve. I remember the very first night Scott came over and he actually helped out for a couple days wiring. And the first one, you know, we'd strip it all, you'd crimp it, which is a huge pain in the butt, especially after you do about 1,000 crimps. Your hand is like, it's crimped. And you get it and you think, oh, I got this snake done. Scott would come over literally and he would just grab it and he would just pull on the pins and pop, pop, pop. I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, do it again. That's not good enough. Like, what? So you got to get the crimps. And he'd come over, and when he would pull, if they wouldn't come off, he'd be like, yeah, that one's good. And literally, probably the first couple snakes I know that I did, he just came over and I didn't get the crimps good enough. I didn't have the wire. I figured out, even with the Megami and some of the canard that's in there, I would double bend it over, put the crimp on. I wasn't dropping solder on it, which I probably should have been, but I wasn't. So he was just making sure the crimp, and he just pop, pop, pop. I'm sitting there going, no. But once you get it down, it's not so bad. But initially, it was like, holy crap. And that whole freaking, that was our station. It was in the live room. So we were still working, doing some drywall and painting. Ernesto would be doing some of that, and then I'd come over and help him. Then I'd go finish something else. And it was just kind of this conveyor belt of trying to get all this stuff done. And at this point, it's just pretty much Ernesto, Mike, and myself. Here's the first panels. This is something I wish I would have filmed more of, but I'm getting ready to build. Well, there's part 2 of the live room makeover that I still need to get up, hopefully next week, that has a couple panels. And then I'm getting ready to build some more gobos, which I'll film. But these are the initial types of panels that went in the live room and that were hanging on this wall. So they're 8 feet tall, 2 feet wide. The one with the diffusers, the skyline, those are full of Roxol as well. So there's one panel there you can see is rigid fiberglass, and the other one is mineral Roxol, AFB. And those were hanging in the live room. Those were on my walls here in the control room, all initially anyway. And it's a simple frame. It's a pine frame. They all got covered, so I wasn't worried about the wood or anything, you know, looking good on the outside. So a simple pine frame, 1x4s with you can see there's like in the middle, there's a support. And the ones that have Roxol, I had a 1x2 that went top to bottom that just helped hold those in so that stuff stays upright. So it's slightly compressed, not compressed, but it's slightly compressed in there just to keep that stuff from falling over. Because that stuff over time will kind of droop. But I prefer, if I have to sit in a room, I prefer mineral wool over rigid fiberglass. And there's a difference in feel. I don't know if there's necessarily a difference in how it shapes some of the tonality in the room, but I can definitely tell if I'm sitting next to the rigid fiberglass panels or if I'm sitting next to the Roxol. There's something more natural to my ear just in the space with the Roxol than there is with the rigid fiberglass. And maybe it's placebo to me, but I don't think so. I just prefer the feel of it with that. So I built the majority of my panels in here are all Roxol, the mineral wool. Yeah, so some of these are a mess. I mean, when this went together, I only had a plan so far. Once I knew I had this place and I knew the date when I was going to get it, I drew out probably 30 versions of this room. I bought Rod Gervais's book. Let me grab that. Hold on a sec. this book, and I still like refer to this every once in a while if I'm working on new stuff. This book was a lifesaver. So much good info. And there were a couple others I bought. They're not in the front anymore. I don't know what I did with them. But this one, I got a ton of info. This book really helped me out a ton. And like I said, I still refer to it. But I drew out so many variations of this, trying to do calculations on size, given the space I had, knowing that I wanted a decent sized control room. I needed a little bit of storage. Little did I know when I built this place how much freaking storage I was going to need. Now I wish I had a storage space the same size as this entire studio, but I don't have that. But I drew all these versions out until I found one that I thought, like, ratio-wise was going to work. And I did it all by myself with tons of research, which was also a learning experience, because the whole acoustics things, especially now that when I talk to friends of mine that do it, then you can sit and crunch numbers all day long, but in practice, some things are different, or can be very, very different. But also, it's an art, man. So the guys the people that build these rooms that are just really nice, and especially when acoustically they're very sound, it's kind of like lighting in movies to me, man. I worship those people because that stuff is an art. I learned a lot, and I learned enough to know that sometimes you can know enough information to be dangerous to make something worse. And there were many times in here that I actually didn't make something better and I had to redo it. So that's why I don't think I'd build a studio next time. But a lot of this, once the walls were up, everything that was going to happen on the inside, I had no real idea. And I also had a limited amount of budget. So it's not like I could go build 75 panels and put them all over and move things. I had enough money to build, I don't know, I think we built maybe 10 or 12 panels initially, and I had to try to make it work as best I could with that, knowing that I could change it over time. So some of this, I mean, this is just the initial hanging of stuff to see if it's working. And I had a rail system, you can see they're hanging from rails. That's all gone now, but every wall had that, so I could literally move those panels all over, change the tone of the room. We did that so little that I just ended up getting rid of them. All right, here we go. This is version 1 of the control room here. It was much easier to pull extra cable. Yeah. Oh yeah. That BGD, that's exactly what Scott told me. He goes, even if you don't wire it on each end, put all this stuff in the wall so you don't have to do it later. And I've still added a ton more as it's gone, but it did make all that initial stuff a lot easier. So this is first version control room. No console, as you can see. Just had a good old, I think that's an Office Depot desk. Had the 8s. That's all the gear from the original studio. Had all those MXLM packs. You can see some of the Golden Age stuff there. You can see the panels that were hanging on the wall on the left. The super chunks in the corner. And that's the initial cloud that was hanging above back here. And that's actually repurposed in the ISO booth now. I fixed that up. Had the China balls going. The ceiling was black. Man, the floor looked good then. Now it's so beat up. And here's the back. So I had the Skyline diffusers on the back, but initially I didn't have any. There was no directly behind the mix station. I had no absorption. There was, except for what's up in the ceiling, that huge one that goes across the ceiling, there's no bass trapping on that back wall, except the ceiling in the corner. And that's how this whole place started. I did have the coffee machine in the control room, which there was room for it at the time. I would not do that now. All right, this is floor. This was another thing that I wish I would not have taken a week to do, because it looked really good to start off with. And that's also what it looks like when you have a mohawk and you don't shave the sides of your head enough, and it looks like, well, that's what it looks like. It's not a great look. This initially looked really good as it was shiny. It did not last at all. And I ended up, a year in, scraping everything off the floor. And this, I think, this was Christmas of 2013, because I let that stuff sit while I was out of town. and cured it, and it just was, in theory, it seemed like a great idea. In practice, no, it did not work out whatsoever. So here's the very first drum session. This is a buddy of mine, Abel Vallejo. He's out teching. He was Ray Luzier's tech for a long time. He was a student of mine at MI. He's a really good drummer. I mean, a really good drummer. I think he's out teching for Charlie Benante right now. But this was the very first session in the studio was Abel, which was awesome because he's a good dude. So that was a fun drum session, actually. You maybe see a little Ray Luzier influence there, with the china up in the middle, All right, there's a little closer shot. So this is got to be early 2014 when everything is kind of done. So that was the initial paneling in the live room on the back, which was all absorption. And that's the initial gear. That's what I rolled with for about 3 or 4 years before the Toft went in. Let's flip through some of these. Yeah, okay, there's the back wall. Yeah, see that floor looked good for a second. Yeah, so you can see the rail system there. And that worked. It made it easy to move panels, but I just ended up doing it so little. There's a good wide shot. It was so bare bones. And it didn't sound bad. It was a little on the bright side there, but it didn't sound bad. It's a lot better now than what it was, I will say. Okay, this was I had to throw this one in here because this was from a full-on drum shoot with Glenn Sobel, and he played this little kid's kit, and he shredded on it. If you go, this video is still up on the Full-On Drums channel. The intro with Sobel is him blasting on this little kit, and he's the stick spins and everything. It was freaking awesome. Go check that one out because it's pretty freaking cool. So this is Peisty Shoot. That's J.R. Robinson. When they released the signature, the more affordable line of the precision signature, and we did the shoot for that here. We basically would get these giant sheets of paper, like 12 feet tall and like 40 feet long, and we would roll it out. We have panels everywhere behind those absorption panels, and there's some and then they went, which is very similar to, if you saw the recent live room update, it's very, very similar to that. And that was the initial ones on the wall in there. Oh, this is good. These aren't in here anymore. Let me see if I miss anything. So you're just playing the floor and use carpet to isolate things. Yeah, I learned that about I made the mistake on the concrete where I didn't etch it before I did it. So some areas it actually adhered really well and some it just didn't. And then we taped stuff on the floor so much, especially when we were doing video shoots, it eventually just started pulling up and you had all this, first it looked like abstract art and then it just bothered me. But the concrete, I actually don't mind concrete. And I actually like it better without the paint because it's not quite as bright. But Henson down in one of my favorite studios has got a great sounding room. They got all concrete floors and stuff in there, so it's really good. But now it's, if I need something under, I just throw down the carpet. What issues with the stream? What's going on? Is there a problem? You guys let me know. Let me look. YouTube's telling me I got a good connection, so if I don't, yell at me. Are we back now? Okay. That's probably Spectrum, man. I tell you what, don't go and get me started on that Spectrum crap. And especially their business internet. Yeah. And that's the only option we have over here. That's the other thing that sucks. So unfortunately, and you can yell all you want, but when they're the only option, what are they going to do? They're not going to do anything. So I'll keep an eye on this. But yeah, so far it says good. So I'm gonna am I missing anything here? But yeah, the floor, I wish, if I was going to do that again, I would definitely hire someone to do it and come in and do it right. And I've seen some really nice painted floors that would be really cool. But for now, it's so far down on the bottom of my list, it's not even funny. But this is the photo of the initial, these are the big polys that were hanging on the back wall for a while, that are no longer in the room. They look good, but it's all changed. I want to get to a few others. Yeah, so some of these, yeah, this is when initially I was trying to figure out what was going to go on these walls, you know, where was I putting the drums, where were you recording stuff? And these are two different kind of setups we were trying out. And then they'd move around. I'll admit, and probably that first, because there was no definitive plan or idea of what I wanted the room to sound like, because I was figuring it out as I went. I just knew I had the space to do it. A lot of this was build some panels, move them around, see what worked, see what didn't work. If it didn't work, try to figure out why. And in the beginning, I'm not sure I always identified why very well, very fast. You know, I just, oh, something's wrong, so you just move something around and, you know, is that better? I don't know, it's different. And so it took a while to really get my ears wrapped around what it was I wanted and then how to listen for that. And then at that point, what do you do to the room to make that happen? And in some ways, I'm just now figuring that out 10 years into this whole thing, which is why I've redone that room and been redoing the control room. So if you're doing this stuff at home and you keep moving things around or you find problems, you don't know how to fix it, man, I feel your pain. Just keep doing it and just try to, best thing to do is identify what you don't like. I think that's easier than identifying what is right, because I don't like that. Okay, then why? And then figure that out. And here we go. The very first session with the Toft, and it was Dr. Ray Luzier for a full-on drums episode. I didn't have the whole thing wired up, actually. You can see there's only tape on the left side of the board. I only had 8 channels wired up because I think I dropped this in the day or two before this, or that week before. And so I'm still using mainly outboard. And I had no idea that that's when the real wiring started, and I went, holy crap. So there's the first round with the Toft. And that's when I realized having a console was going to make my life way easier. I mean, it did not take long, actually. And then that rack gear, as you'll see in some of these photos as we go, started to, that's a little nicer photo. Oh, there's our Audio-Technica Blue, same thing. That giant paper, which is a pain in the ass to work with, but damn does it look good on video. Initial mic setup. Let me see, I'm gonna flip through, let me see if I can find, here we go, okay. Yes, this, I got nothing bad to say about that Toft. Did a lot. I got to cut my teeth on it here. Got to realize that a console was going to be the thing that was going to make just workflow better for the type of work I was doing anyway. Did a lot of music on it. Sounded great. It was awesome. But this day, this was the fun one when the initial Trident went in and I got to start doing all that beta testing. You can see the Toft still set up on the left side. And Justin and Joe helping there, man, this was a fun day. I think I'm smiling more than they are because I was super excited. I mean, ever since that day, it's just been glorious. And that was the initial setup with the Trident. Still had all the black racks, still had some of a bunch of the outboard Golden Age pre's over there. The HD3s in, the Trident speakers. Oh man, those are the days. Only like 5 patch bays in there. Now I got 9. Holy crap. And there is the first round of the control room with the Trident in. Toft was still, we hadn't got rid of the Toft yet. It was still sitting over there on the side. Not wired up or anything, but I told people it was. Oh yeah, I got 2 consoles. No one believed me. This was a fun session. Chad Smith, Kevin Chown. That was a loud day. Really loud. Holy crap. Both of those guys together rock. And yeah, see, this is you can see the floor. I mean, all these early shots of the room, man, I can't remember. So the white wall on the left, what you see there, that is a window. There's actually 3 layers of drywall on that. That is all the wood, the birch wall in there now. But initially it was the cinder block and those windows were just covered with multiple layers of drywall filled with insulation. And then that's the floor. You can see where all the paint was pulling stuff up, and that was a mistake. Huge mistake. Let me flip through. Oh man, I had short hair. So this is, oh yeah, when I put the shelf for the speakers, the first time I built that shelf, move the computer to the left side. That's the other thing. How many of you guys, when you move stuff around, I feel like for each year or half a year in this initial studio, I would, oh, I don't like this here. I move it here, and then I move it here. And it was never settled. I don't think I ever had like the workflow the way I wanted, or something in the right space. Or as you get more gear, you're like, man, I really want this here, but it doesn't fit because of this gear and stupid monitor. You know, that thing, that's a headache in and of itself. That moved right side, left side, right back, all over the place for a while. Does anybody else go through that? Or is it just me that could never get happy with what I had? Man. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna do a quick just a reboot of the freaking connection. There we are. Fuck you, Spectrum. Okay, I reset this damn connection again. I hate Spectrum, man. It's been so iffy lately. I don't know if they got too many connections going on around here, but pay a lot of money for business connection to have this freaking problem. Man. Son of a bitch. All right, Restream tells me killer, YouTube says not. Let me know if you guys, if we're back or if it's still hanging up. Got good at Restream. All right, there it looks like, man, this Spectrum shit could piss me off. You've never had a dedicated studio space, so my tracking room is never the same. Yeah, I feel like even with the dedicated space, it's never the same. Now it is. It took me 10 years to get there. But the old space in Hollywood was that way because it was just one room, and that was like a constant shuffle, man. All right, hopefully it stays now. I reset the router again, so hopefully now we'll see. I know who my next call is going to be to, and it's a company named Spectrum, because this stuff is getting old. All right, I'm going to flip through a few more. What time is it? Because I have a session at noon. Okay, this was like 2017, 2018. This is the way the studio stayed for quite a while. And this is, you know, little changes here and there, but that was pretty much the way it worked for, you know, the couch on the side. There were actually two couches in there at that point. And that couch that you've seen, the tan one, that was Oscar's favorite. He's always napping on that sucker. And if you went to sit on that couch, you could lay back. He would literally get on the couch and just stare at you. And if you leaned forward, he would walk behind you so you couldn't lean back, and he would just stay standing behind you until you got up and left the couch. It was like that was his couch. And then I moved it to the live room. I think we moved it in there we did a live stream. We just had the couch in there for people to sit on. But this is You can see the floor is no longer black. This is more of what everything became now. It's closer to what it is now anyway, minus all the extra Christmas lights. That was a fun session. Fiorabracci, Marshall, Sobel. That was for a Roswell shoot. That old Rogers kit. Oh my God, that Rogers kit was nice. Yeah, see, there's Oscar. That was his couch, period. And we were an inconvenience to him if you were sitting in it. Okay, here's Birch Wall. This is when this initially went in. And it's I think I have a couple photos. That wall got completely redone last year, and it's completely floating now. But that was the initial wall with the birch, which changed the sound of the room considerably. And then the live room is, well, it's much different today, but this is kind of what it was for about 3 or 4 years, pretty much this. And it worked out well. Then the ceiling got finished off. That was another round of drywall, and I did that by myself. I don't recommend doing drywall on the ceiling by yourself. I don't recommend doing drywall by yourself anyway. It's a pain, but I tend to do that. But I did all of this except for the last 2 bays where I had Ernesto help me by myself. And it was, yeah, it was work. Okay, there's that. Another Roswell shoot with that's a Philip Bino on bass. Ernesto played guitar on this one. Greg Garman on drums. Another shot of the control. Yeah, see, here's another version of the control room. Things have moved around yet again. And that's another thing with cabling, man. I'm sure some of you have the same issues every time you move stuff. You got cable everywhere, so I would just buy longer cable I needed. It's like if I'm going to run from the console to here, I'd buy 25 feet, you know, because what if I'm going to move it? And then you just end up with the spaghetti everywhere. And that got old. That's when I redid this. I cut 80% of that out. The other 20%, I just ran out of time and had to get back to work. But just moving, you know, when you're indecisive, so this is a big change. This is when it went from those old cheap racks to the wood racks that are no longer in here now too. So there was one partial rewire. And then that panel got redone. Oh yeah, the wood went around that. See, this is all the little stuff that went on that some of it's aesthetic only, you know, like that. Didn't really need a wood panel around there, but when you're in the room and it's finished, it looks better, and it's easier to label things because I can put the tape on the wood. Yeah, here's a shot. Yeah, you can see the ceiling, the sawtooth ceiling is done in this one. Well, the drywall is in. Now it's half painted and half birch. Initial compressor rack. It's hard to look at those open 500 slots. Anybody else have that problem? You get a 500 rack or some gear, and there's open spaces, and all you're working, all you do is just keep looking over going, man, that's empty. Yep, still empty. You know, I'm going to take a 10-minute break real quick. I'm just going to jump on reverb. See what I can feel. Yeah, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Yeah, that's all the... Yep, there's another, well, it's kind of, once it went to this configuration, it pretty much stayed in that for the most part. Oh, I lied. Look at that. Already a change. Added another rack on the side, and they moved yet again. The constant freaking movement, just insane. Oh, Ernesto, what's he doing? Oh, wherever he's at right now, the signal's too weak, so he won't be able to join. All right, let's get, yeah, just a lot. Oh yeah, here, this is a good one. So this is actually, I think early last year. This is the wall, the birch wall, that it was cinder block, and then it was just some like 2x4 furring strips, and then all that, and there was a little insulation behind it, and then that birch. But I wanted that wall to get finished from front to back. So I hired a crew to come in. We took all that stuff out, put new 2x4 furring strips in, and then put hat channel. So this is pre-hat channel. I think the next one, yeah, there we go. So all of this wall is entirely, it's 2 layers of drywall with the insulation behind it, and then the birch paneling on the front. And it's all, not hat channel, it's actually resilient channel. So it's floated. We floated it about that much, about a half, well, that's about a half inch or so off the ground. So it's only connected, and the same thing at the top, it's not touching anywhere. And then huge 12-foot sheets of drywall. These guys, watching these guys do drywall was impressive. I mean, they did this whole thing in a day. Not even a day, they were done by 5. I think it started at 8:30. 5 o'clock, they were in their cars going home. I mean, it was just like boom, 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 boom. Impressive. And we didn't have to worry about, we caulked all the joints. We didn't do any mudding. Everything on both layers of drywall was all acoustical caulking, which is not cheap, but worth it because it was getting covered with the birch. And the frames went back up, and then that's pretty much what it is now. And it was a huge improvement in isolation from the outside, because that wall, which is right here, is actually the driveway that goes to the parking lot. So there's not a lot of traffic there, but now and again when you get people leaving in and out from work, you get some extra noise. And the cinder block itself in some of these commercial buildings isn't all full. I did sand load a lot of it, which is another headache in and of itself, but it's hard to do that post because you don't have you can't quite get as much in as you would like. This made a huge improvement to my isolation from the outside, big time. Wish I would have done it 10 years ago. Oh, okay, now we're in modern times. This is December of last year. This is the board down at Trident when they are turning it from, making it from a 24 to a 32. And Justin sent me this in the middle of building it just to see what was going on. I think I was on vacation, so he was teasing me going, oh, it's almost done. And then the new panels. You guys, there's a video with all of this stuff. This is the new cloud that's hanging right in here, which is gigantic. There's the new and the old. I'll tell you one thing, that when you're hanging these things, this is all mineral wool now, which I do like better. But oh my Lord, is it ridiculously heavy compared to that rigid fiberglass. And I hung those by myself, which was not an easy task. Because this thing is 7 feet wide by 5 feet deep by 8 inches thick. It is massive. And most of you guys have seen this. You can see the floor. I need to put new flooring in. Yeah, if anybody's ever done this patch bay crap, I don't need to say anything more about that photo. And then there's a whole video from this part of the wiring that I went through everything. Delilah helping out. And there's where we are today, which you can see somewhat blurrily out of me because I have the prime lens on the camera. Let me see. We good? Have the fun still hanging? Please tell me we're not hanging still. Really? It's so this. Well, I hope the stream isn't hanging now. I hope it's been, solid. But this has been, it's been an experience, and I kind of just, I don't think I'd ever shown any of these photos of how it went together and just kind of told the story and what limited resources there were. And I was actually talking to Brad Keeler from Progressive Design across the street the other day because he's helping me out with a couple things that will be going up hopefully relatively soon in the live room. But we were just talking about, they work with some of the best acousticians. They're working everywhere from Capitol Studio. They're getting ready to do some work at Henson. I mean, they're working in, every time he comes over here, I'm almost like, But we were just talking about, one, you have to work with what you have, and if you think through it a little bit, you can do something that works really well, because this place works really freaking well. And it was built by me. I'm not the brightest guy in the world. I'm not an acoustician, math isn't my friend. I'm a drummer. I count to 4, and after that, you never know what's going to happen. But enough planning went into it initially that at least the foundation of what I did, what I messed up, none of that was detrimental, for one, and most of it I could fix. But at least the initial planning got a good foundation for everything. So as I learned more and asked questions to people that know more than me, I constantly bug Brad. He probably sees a text come up from me, he's like, but that's how you learn, right? But as I ask questions and learn that stuff, I can fix the things that aren't right. So if you're doing this at home, just do it. You know, the other thing too is if you make a mistake, no one's gonna die. You know, if my bass trapping wasn't right and I wrecked the sound of the room, no one's dead. I'm irritated. I'm probably gonna yell, but it's fixable. The same thing with any of the building of anything inside. Unless you build a wall that doesn't stay up and it falls on somebody, okay, someone might die then. So make sure your walls are good. But don't be afraid to just plan out with whatever you have. Your budget is always going to dictate what you can do, period. Which everybody, I'm probably preaching to the choir there, you know, Captain Obvious here. But your budget's going to dictate everything. Everything initially. The drywall, the framing, the initial panels that I didn't bring from the old studio. I brought everything, but it was not that big, so it wasn't that many. The glass. What cabling I had to buy, connectors. I mean, that was a huge expense that, boy, I didn't plan for in the beginning of that. Ernesto and I laugh about that all the time now that, you know, you get it in and you think, oh, now I just got to, you know, let's go get some snakes and put it in. And, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 later, and we built everything initially, did not buy commercial snakes. So it took a long time to do, especially since, at least for me, I was learning how to do a lot of that for the very first time. I could do basic soldering, but I had never wired a freaking studio before. So I was learning how to do all that. And the cabling adds up so fast, so quick. But all of this, less than 20 grand for this whole thing. That's, if you've ever built anything, you know, that sounds like a lot of money, and it still sounds like a lot of money to me. But when you're doing a studio, man, it's not a lot of money. It goes really, really fast. So planning as best you can. If you've got friends or know of anyone that's ever done it, just ask questions. At the very least, you'll learn what not to do. And that's just as important. Or like Scott came in and goes, dude, you're going to want a tie line like this. You're going to want this. You're going to want this. Here's why. You're going to run this here. You're going to run this here. You're going to want to do all that. And it's stuff I didn't even know about that turned out to be in my absolutely everyday workflow. So planning is a big thing. What would you do different? Diamond District Studio, that is the billion-dollar question. Not the $1 million, the $1 billion. If I was starting over in this same space, what would I do different? Well, first off, that window right there would be twice the size. I'd actually probably make it go all the way from base trap to base trap, so it'd be probably about 10 feet wide, and I'd make it go a foot, you know, down and a foot up. That's the first thing I would do. The back wall and the ISO, I mean, some of this is dictated by space too. I would do both of my walls in the live room. Right now the back wall is actually splayed forward, so they're not technically parallel. But I would, my ISO booth wall here, when you walk in, instead of just being like this is the wall, right? Here's the door to go into the live room. I would have built that like this. So the window of the control room is here. The ISO booth door is here, so instead of being like this, I would have done this so I had a little more room in the ISO, and I could have put a full glass door in the ISO. I do have glass going in that door, but right now, since it's like this, you can only look to the back of the room. I hope this direction's making sense. So this is control room wall, this is the back of the room wall. I wish I would have angled it full glass door, so if you had someone in there, which doesn't happen that often to be honest with you, but if you had, say, a singer in there, the glass, you could see the majority of the room. And I would have done the exact same thing on the back wall. And I probably would have moved that back wall back another 2 feet. Although storage now back there is quite full with all the drum sets, my soldering station, all the hardware and everything, I still probably would have moved it back just a hair and got a little more room out of the live room. But construction-wise, the big one is that window and I don't think you can see it. Well, you kind of see it. See the right there? Here. Let me get out of the photos. Let me go to just a clean angle here. This will be easier to see. Let me get rid of the P&P. Come on, go away. This picture-in-picture drives me nuts because, there we go. Now cut in. There we go. Okay, so you can see right here, that is a window to the ISO booth. And it's not very big. it's like, it's a picture window. And usually, you know, the vocalist, if we're doing vocals in there, goes somewhere there so you can see him. But I also would have done that wider so I could see in there, make it a lot easier to see. And then I would have put a really heavy curtain over it, which I still may do for this, the way it is now, so you could block that off when you were mixing, or if you didn't have someone in there, so you just wouldn't have that reflection coming back. But those walls are also not parallel, they are angled. So my reflection coming off those walls I don't really have an issue with that. And those windows are also angled. So that it angles down, and then the wall itself is angled, so there is no parallel reflection there. But I think the big thing is, that's the biggest things that I would definitely do different. And then maybe some of the routing on some of my lighting. You know, that was one thing I didn't think about as much as first. And now with all the cool LED stuff that we can do, you got so many cool options. So it's a little easier to retrofit lighting now with Wi-Fi lighting, because every light in this control room is Wi-Fi lighting. Every single one of them. And it's all colored LEDs, so I can change it. Half of them in the live room are, which eventually I will get them all that way. But that is, that's probably the biggest. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I have about a little over 1,600 square feet total. So again, kind of like your budget dictates everything, so does the sizes of your space, of what you can do. If I really got to do it again, I'd love a space twice the size of this is what I would like. That would be ideal, with a gigantic storage room. That would be huge. Ooh, South Africa in the house. Oh, Diamond District Studios, nice. But anyway, you guys, it's 11:11. I have a session starting in 50 minutes with the new band that I'm working with. We got 2 days of full band tracking, so I'm gonna have to run because I need to tear this camera and stuff down, and I have a few things to set up. But since today is literally 10 years to the day of the studio, I just wanted to share some photos. You could say hey to everybody and kind of celebrate, you know, holy crap, it's been 10 freaking years, man. I'm hoping for another 10. That would be really awesome. So a couple things coming up, just why I got everybody. Right now working on scheduling a time. Gary Boss from Audio Technica is going to join. We're just trying to nail down. Probably going to be a Saturday. Probably going to be on the earlier side. Probably 10 or 11 again. I'll try to give as much advance notice on that. I'm going to nail down a time with David Vignola to come back on. Actually, I'll probably text him later today a couple times to see what his availability is. We're going to talk some business, you know, and running the business, getting clients, all that, you know, dealing with clients, all that fun sort of stuff that, you know, we're all fighting with all the time. And then I got two others, working on another acoustic guy, just also same thing there. It's a lot of nailing down dates right now, but there's a couple cool guests coming up. When Ernesto gets back in town, we're going to do a slew of recording live streams. So we'll get that cooking again. And yeah, that's it. So you guys, thank you for joining me this morning. I'm going to go make another pot of coffee because I think this is cold. Oh, cold coffee's the worst. And I'll see you guys really, really soon. Probably in about a week. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend. Now I got to figure out what program I'm in so I can cut it out. All right. Later, guys.